We're sure you've seen this castle before. Maybe you don't know its name, maybe you've never set foot in Bavaria, but you've seen it. A white castle on a cliff above the clouds with towers reaching for the sky. Because this castle is so enchanting that it's widely believed to have inspired the Disney castle itself, the very symbol of fairy tales. But this castle wasn't built by a fairy tale, it was built by a man. A man who ended up deposed, declared insane by doctors, and found dead in a lake. Among the many names people gave him, one stuck: the Mad King. Today, we're traveling across Bavaria to visit his castles, one by one. Because they're not just monuments, each one hides a chapter of that story. King Ludwig II of Bavaria was born in 1845 and grew up mainly between Nymphenburg and Hohenschwangau castle. His father, Maximilian, who would later become king, restored Hohenschwangau in the 1830s. Originally, the site dates back to the 12th century when it was a medieval fortress belonging to the Knights of Schwangau. Now, imagine growing up here, waking every morning to the Bavarian Alps, the still waters of the Alpse, the silent forests. He spent much of his youth here with his brother Otto, surrounded by beautiful paintings and historical scenes. For a quiet, imaginative boy, all of this left a deep mark. Hohenschwangau became his first idea of what a romantic castle should be, an idea he would never let go of. But Ludwig's childhood was about to end. Suddenly. In 1864, Maximilian II died suddenly, and at just 18, Ludwig became King of Bavaria. His first act as king? He summoned to his court a bankrupt composer, Richard Wagner. Ludwig paid his debts and gave him total creative freedom, because Wagner's operas were everything he loved: Germanic myths, Grail, knights. And soon, Ludwig would decide that world shouldn't exist only in music. He would build it in stone. There it is. Neuschwanstein Castle. Before we get closer, one question. What does Neuschwanstein actually mean? Break it apart. Neu, Schwan, Stein, new, swan, stone. The swan was the emblem of this valley, Schwangau, the Swan District, and it had been Ludwig's favorite symbol since his childhood at Hohenschwangau, right across the valley. But to understand why he built it, you need to know what was happening to Bavaria. In 1866, Bavaria had fought a war alongside Austria against Prussia and lost. From that moment, real power shifted toward Berlin, and the King of Bavaria had less and less to actually decide. So this was never meant to be a palace for ruling. Ludwig was building a refuge, a private world close to almost everyone, where he could live inside the Middle Ages he had dreamed of as a child. And that's exactly why Neuschwanstein looks the way it does. It blends Romanesque, Gothic and Byzantine into an ideal Middle Ages that never existed. Critics at the time called it fake. Filming inside is not allowed today, but if you step behind the walls, the illusion breaks. Running water on every floor, central heating, hot food arriving by lift. The most advanced technology of the century, hidden inside a medieval dream. Ludwig knew exactly what era he lived in. He simply chose not to belong to it. Construction began in 1869, and 17 years later, when Ludwig died, it still wasn't finished. Of more than 200 planned rooms, only about 15 were ever completed. The rest remain empty shells even today. But while Ludwig built his dream, the world outside kept moving, and it was moving against him. In 1871, that world ended. The German Empire was proclaimed. Dozens of kingdoms united under a single emperor. Bavaria kept its crown, but above its king now stood the Kaiser in Berlin. Ludwig withdrew, deeper into the mountains, deeper into his castles. For his ministers, he was an expensive, invisible king. Because by now, a pattern was clear. Every time the world took something from Ludwig, he built. And the castle rising in those years is the one that reveals him best, the smallest of them all. Most visitors skip this one. They shouldn't. This is Linderhof, the smallest of Ludwig's palaces, and the only one he ever finished. It sits near Oberammergau in a quiet alpine valley. The site began as his father's hunting lodge, and between 1869 and 1879, Ludwig transformed it into a jewel of Rococo. Versailles, shrunk to the scale of one single person.
Inside, the rooms are few, but extremely elaborate, with golden details, mirrors, and references to French culture.
In front of the palace stretch its famous formal gardens, all in perfect symmetry. We were there in early spring, when part of the grounds was still closed, but even a glimpse is enough to get the idea. Everything here was built for an audience of one. And in the park, Ludwig created the strangest place of all, an artificial cave, the Venus Grotto, inspired by Wagner's operas, with an underground lake, a golden boat, and colored electric lighting powered by one of the first power plants in all of Bavaria. This is how far his ideas had gone. Incredible. But Ludwig wasn't done. His final project would be the biggest, the boldest, and the one that destroyed him. To reach Ludwig's last dream, you have to cross a lake. This is Herrenchiemsee, the Bavarian Versailles, his most ambitious project, his most expensive, and the one that stood unfinished the day he died. In 1873, Ludwig bought this entire island in the middle of Lake Chiemsee, and here, far from everything, he set out to build his tribute to Louis XIV, the Sun King, the very symbol of absolute monarchy.
This was Ludwig's most ambitious and expensive project, built between 1878 and 1886.
But Ludwig didn't want a copy. He wanted to surpass the original.
3 wings, long facades, orderly windows, decorations, even more spectacular than French classicism.
And here's the paradox. This was the age of parliaments, constitutions, industry. Everywhere, the power of kings was fading. Yet, he did the exact opposite of his time. He built a palace that declared the king is the sun, the king is the light. But the numbers were catastrophic. The debts became enormous, but they were his own, personal loans, not money from his people. Still, the ministers ran out of patience, and in the spring of 1886, they decided the king had to go. A commission led by the psychiatrist Bernhard von Guden declared King Ludwig II mentally unfit to reign. Ludwig was deposed. On June 12th, he was brought to Berg Castle on the shore of Lake Starnberg under medical watch. The very next evening, he went out for a walk along the water with von Guden. Neither of them came back. They were found that night dead in the shallows of the lake. The official cause, drowning, but what really happened was never established. He was 40 years old. 6 weeks after his death, his castles were open to the public to pay off the debts. Today, the refuge he built to escape the world has become one of the most visited places in it. A reckless king who bankrupted himself for a fantasy or a visionary who left behind what no one else could? A century later, the debate is still open. And how you see him is up to you. But one thing is certain. To visit these castles is not just to walk through their architecture. It's to step inside the mind of a man who chose not to belong to his own time and built himself another world. So, which castle would you step into first? Tell us in the comments and follow us for more journeys into the stories behind the world's most extraordinary places.